Very strong legacy market, which I like to call it. I don't like to use the word black market. I would prefer to use the word illicit. If anything, I call it the legacy market because how everyone consumed prior to having a medical program is they did what they had to do and they had a dude, right? And whoever that dude was, or if it was a woman, whatever the case may be, that was how people navigated. You know what I mean? So we want to make sure that there's opportunities to participate in this industry that doesn't necessarily attach itself to big business, okay? We just came from today, Lobby Day. We partner, myself, I don't want to claim for Women Grow in general. I align myself with an organization called the Drug Policy Alliance. The Drug Policy Alliance is one of the major sponsors in something called the Start Smart program. It is how we would like the legislation to look as we are facing legalization. One of the big things, and I'm sure, now listen, there are many schools of thought when it comes to cannabis legalization. I am not here to tell you how to think, but I will tell you to investigate who is navigating these bills and see what's part of those bills so that if you can align with them, you know you're doing it with your, all your goals and all your intentions are in place. So like for myself, one of the big tenets of the Start Smart program is that community reinvestment. There are a lot of communities that have been over-policed when it comes to cannabis. As we get legalization, as this tax revenue starts to come in, I feel that some of those monies should be directed to the communities that were the most affected by the war on drugs. That's something that I can firmly align myself with. I also believe that if we have big business cannabis, I actually have an event production company. My company is called CANNA. I produce events. So I want a license to produce cannabis events. If we have big business cannabis, I might have those options to have a business in this industry. So if there's not something that we call equity, which means a portion of these large revenues are funneled into smaller businesses to allow women and people of color to participate, we won't have an opportunity to have a diverse and inclusive market. And for a diverse and inclusive state like New York, I think that's a big deal, you know? There are a few other things as far as the Smart program, and please visit Start Smart New York to see how it's listed. But we just came from Albany knocking on doors, and they gave me Westchester, which I found very interesting because they give you a list of all the assembly people to visit, and they tell you if they're in favor or not. And it was like, not. I'm like, really? You're sending me to the wolves now? You know? But here's what I will tell you, and this is what I walked away with. We were having this conversation before we started. I promise you, I'm a mother. I have a 12-year-old son, and my mother is a patient in the program. Okay, so I like to call myself in the cannabis sandwich generation, right? I care for my mother, I'm her caregiver, right? So she has been able to stay off of opiates. She has double hip things, right? Osteoarthritis in both of her. She lives in chronic pain every day. It's painful to watch, okay? But she has not had to touch opiates because she utilizes cannabis and CBD topically, and she takes cannabis, right? It's amazing. Right? But I have a 12-year-old son, and clearly my son is black, right? So am I worried about him navigating in these, you know, when he gets older and having conversations with my son? My son didn't know that cannabis was called weed. He was having a conversation with his son. He was like, "Mommy, is weed cannabis?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He was like, "I did not know because we don't say that in my house. We call it cannabis. If we're having conversations about cannabis, it is about cannabis." So he was hearing it in school, and I'm like, wait a minute, who's talking about weed in 7th grade? But they are.
They absolutely are. Yeah.
So when the opposition says to you, "I'm worried about the kids," for me, who's in favor of cannabis legalization, so am I. So we are the same. So whenever if you're doing any lobbying and you run into somebody who is against you, or rather not in favor of legalization, instead of getting angry with them, I promise you that I'm concerned about people driving while smoking a joint. Not everybody can hold their smoke, right? I want to make sure, you know, that if that's the case, you shouldn't be driving, right? I care about that too. You know, so we have the same, but now, how do we fix it? We can't halt the program, because halting the program means that we can't help patients. Halting the program, which means we can't make any progress. We can't do research, right? We can't do these education programs in schools, which I am big in favor of. I think you have, like we have sex ed, right? We need to have drug ed, right? You hear all these rap songs talk about Xanax. I mean, I'm like, you're talking about Xanax? What happened to smoking a joint? No one's smoking a joint anymore? You want to jump to Xanax and all these pills now, but I wonder why, because they have access to them and people worry about pot, right? They're raiding your medicine cabinets and you're worried about pot. So we really just need to open lines of communication. So the purpose of this meeting was really just to go into the communities, introduce ourselves, talk about the opportunities in the medical program. We need to expand. I'm going to have our lovely Kimber come up and talk about some of that stuff. And to really just talk, we have both of our speakers are entrepreneurs, including myself. There are opportunities. They don't have to be plant touching. Just know that. Yes?
I have an answer to the cannabis while driving. You know how you get a DWI?
Yes.
DWI? You get a CWI. If you
Cannabis while driving.
and if it happens again, you go to jail, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what the DWI...
You know what it is they need to just fine-tune testing. One of the things that we're missing in New York is testing. We don't have enough testers for a cannabis plant. We don't have enough testing for drug testing, because in reality, you know the deal. If you're a cannabis consumer and you consumed a month ago, you're still going to test positive. So it's the testing. Someone needs to be able to tell when you consumed, right? As opposed to that you consumed, because THC will show up in your system. You could have consumed 3 months ago. Because it's medicine and it goes into your bloodstream. Anything that's crap gets eliminated really quickly. That's my personal opinion. But why would it stay in your system? It gets ingrained into your body, into your endocannabinoid system, which is actually a thing that doctors are learning about now. So there's a lot that we need to have happen. A lot of conversations. Yes, I'm going to do Q&A afterwards. Okay, cool. So the first person I'm going to bring up, and then I'm going to like pop up and we're going to just let people talk, and then we'll have time for Q&A. This is a very casual thing, but here's what I would love for us to do. A, you need to follow us on social media, womengrow.com, Women Grow on everything, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are NYC CANNA Divas, so follow us as well, and tell people that we're out here. Because all we want to do is go into communities and educate people. Because when we educate people about the plant, we educate new people that want to build businesses in this space. We educate new advocates. There were about 150 of us in Albany today. I think there should have been 500. In New York, 19 million people and half of them are smoking. We should have had more people up in Albany. Now I understand people have jobs, but right.
We didn't know, no one was notified about anything.
If you were in the community, you would have been notified, so now you need to be part of, boom, you're I am the lead fairy godmother, you are all part of the cannabis community, because we need more advocates. Whatever your perspective is, we need more advocates. Okay, so the first person we're going to bring up, we actually met here at Women Grow, and she is what we call an ancillary business. She is a non-plant touching business. She's going to tell you a little bit about who she is, what she does, and how she got here. The amazing Stella Morrison. Come on.
City in New Jersey, and we're talking about cannabis.
Did I do it right?
Into the space than I ever could, so thank you for that. So as she said, my name is Stella Morrison. I live about 2 blocks that way, and I work in the cannabis space. I have an agency, a marketing agency called CANNA Content, where we work with startups and existing businesses to help communicate about the cannabis experience. CBD and hemp extends to as well, but CBD is a whole other ballgame that we could talk for hours about, so I'm going to kind of put that aside for now. So we handle a lot of skills that you would see in the just out in the world, right? So web development, content development is a big service of ours, search engine optimization, all things that any business needs, and cannabis is a business just like any other industry. So a bit about my professional background. I'm a former award-winning journalist, and I decided I did not want to watch the death of newspapers from the inside, and then I left and moved into the brand licensing industry, where I worked in consumer electronics, in brand messaging and brand voice, excuse me, and then I left to open up my first content agency, which I still operate, in 2015. About 2 years later, one of my freelance writers who I actually met in the newsroom gave me a call one day, and he said, "Hey Stella, I had a new, this investment firm call me, and they read my writing," because he reported on the cannabis space for a couple of years, and he said, "I don't know what to charge, you know, they asking me to help with all this content, they're asking me to help with like their pitch deck, what do I do?" And I'm giving him advice, I'm talking to Adam, and as I'm talking, the light bulb switches at the moment, and I said, "Oh my God, this is a business that people need." So, you know, it's no secret. I mean, that was 2017, and my first event was a Women Grow event where I met Tanya, and we've been in the industry for about 3 years, which in cannabis that's like 20 years, but it's such a rapidly evolving industry that it's to find a business this young or this old is really kind of two sides of the same coin. So forgive my note card, I'm a great a little bit with this. So when the light bulb went off, a lot of different viewpoints kind of came careening into one, like this big aha moment. I had already, you know, was familiar with cannabis already, and I already had pretty significant opinions about legalization. I specifically, prison reform was something, you know, I thought was a huge injustice that you're arresting people for this plant. I already had strong opinions about that. From a personal liberty perspective, I definitely had some strong opinions from that way as well, but that never translated to career for me. I assumed because there is no large legal operating industry, especially on the East Coast where we really focus our heart and attention, I just assumed that there was no opportunity. And when I started doing the research and started connecting with folks who were already operating, and not just operating but thriving in legally operating situations, not a legacy business of any sort, where they were already operating and saying, "Oh, well, this is something I can do as well," and that kind of circle from there, and now here we are. Tanya had asked me a little bit to address what's going on in New Jersey. I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm actually a very recent transplant to New York. New Jersey is going after a very long, very confusing battle. Not necessarily confusing, but a lot of back and forth, a lot of hope was held out. One of the reasons we had launched our agency when we did is because Governor Phil Murphy had run on a promise of legalization through the legislature, which Illinois has done recently, and Vermont has done, no other state has done that. And that's something that was really exciting to us, and we held like our public announcement to when Phil Murphy got elected because of this. So once it became pretty clear that wasn't happening, they finally, you know, there's a lot of issues with the details of the bill, how things would be rolled out, and they just simply couldn't get the votes after a couple of years. So it's been a frustrating process, but now it is on ballot referendum. It will be voted on in the November election. So that's going to be hopefully a different process than New York, depending on the legislation, but New Jersey's not from behind. New Hampshire is starting, just today, New Hampshire started to talk, Connecticut is starting to talk, Pennsylvania, things are moving. It's once one state goes, we're too close to each other, right? When one state goes, the next is gonna go, the next is gonna go. And it's been a really kind of a frustrating waiting game for a lot of folks who are waiting to operate a little bit better. You know, folks who wanna work with you, but they're waiting for the other shoe to drop, and that shoe has been kind of dangling here for a couple of years now, so that's been a little bit, but we're, you know, very much looking, as much as a lot of advocates did not want the ballot referendum, they wanted to go through the legislature, we're obviously hoping for the best for that. So Tanya mentioned a term before, ancillary business. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means. So my business does not touch the plant whatsoever. That's the distinction within the industries, plant touching and ancillary. The plant touching is where you're conducting cultivation, where you're actually processing, laboratory testing and dispensing. Those are some examples of plant touching businesses. Ancillary business is quite literally everything else you can think of outside of that material, outside of that grouping of businesses. So a marketing agency like mine is considered an ancillary business. What Tanya does is considered an ancillary business. We don't touch the plant. We don't have those sort of relationships with that. So people sort of assume that you're not going to run into legal problems. Not to say that I have run into it, but I have run into challenges operating as an ancillary business in this space. I lost my banking account for 6 months because I service businesses in this space. They said, I got a check in the mail that said, we don't want your money, too bad, goodbye, and just sent me my money back. I was in Las Vegas at the time. It was a very, very complicated couple weeks, but it took me 6 months to find transparent banking. And that is, that's one of the challenges you might find in this space. And even though, and thankfully, because there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of concern about operating in this space that other services may not work with you. So thankfully there's been a lot of progress since I lost my bank account last year, and thankfully I am now banking completely transparently with a wonderful bank in New Jersey, but it took time to get there, and it's almost considered a rite of passage in the industry, right? If you lost your bank account, you've made it. It happens, and it's a social media issue as well, which is something that we deal with as a marketing agency all the time, because advertising, obviously, it is a restricted industry. You are dealing with folks who are nervous about their child seeing a billboard, for example, and they're like, hey, buy weed here, they're very nervous about that. So there are restrictions both from a legislative perspective, where you can put advertising, especially outdoor. There's going to be the same with any other high risk or restrictive industry. You're going to see that, and then you also have issues with the private platforms as well. So all these, we talk about following on social media, all these materials, but you technically plant touching especially, but ancillary is a little bit of a gray area, cannot be operating on the platforms. So that there's a lot of issues of accounts being shut down because they are quote unquote not in policy. Facebook is notoriously secretive, but they are concerned about you selling drugs on their platform. So even if you are just an event planner or or a conference or an agency like mine, that might be considered, they might be playing safe and sorry, and when you are spending literally 3 seconds reviewing a post, there's not much wiggle room to fight with that. So there are folks who get their account shut down, there are platforms that flat out refuse to work with you, and you kind of cross your fingers and hope you don't get caught. So that could be definitely be a part of that as well. So you face those challenges, and and any business that you operate in this ancillary space, if you like puzzles and you like challenges, this is the space for you. It's a very much a place that's looking for, there's problem solving, right? How do you continue to get the message out when everybody in the world is going to look for you on Facebook and they don't care that you're going to get shut down or that Google AdWords doesn't take your money. They don't care. People just want the information, and that's where as specialty agencies like mine come in and help work with folks to help them still get their word out in a way that is compliant as possible. But the goalposts change a lot, and I'm happy to answer questions after, but I'm getting kind of down the rabbit hole. And one more point I wanted to bring up, and Tanya briefly touched on, was how do you who knows what I'm doing, right? What is this stigma that you might have attached? So I've been, I'm not a parent. I've been pretty lucky that I have not faced a ton of pushback. I do think part of that is generational. My rule of thumb is if I don't care that my mom knows about it, I'm cool, right? And my mom she knows what I do. Thankfully, she's Friday got her onto CBD. I think she should be a patient, but haven't gotten her that far yet. But CBD, there's a victory. It's one thing, and that's been helping. So the legal, not legal distinction does scare people a little bit. It scares her a little bit, and those are those conversations I'm definitely open to having. I've spoken with friends' parents and can switch their minds in 5 minutes, right? Just talking to them about why legalization should happen, specifically New Jersey, but really any state. But it's a funny space, because when I started posting a little bit more on social media about what I'm doing, stopped hiding it. There are a couple members of my family who are unrestricted, and I don't let them see what I'm doing because I don't want to have that conversation. But my friend count started going down a little bit, and it was mostly from friends who are working in education, working in early childhood education, or who have small children of their own, like people who did not come to my wedding as a result, right? Like it was just, and I couldn't think of, it's upsetting for sure. Do I regret it? I never will. It is something I will never regret. There's something so powerful about the community being built around folks who are open to having the conversation. But when I am talking to new people, I do read the room before I disclose what I do. It is not like I'm hiding what I do. There is nothing, I have no shame about it. Everyone knows, my father-in-law knows, my mother knows, and there you go, that's my barometer. They know I'm cool, but it's I'm finding that, you know, the more I talk about it, the more people just have questions. I get the sample joke every day. I get the joke a lot, but most people just have questions, and a lot of the questions are very basic. It's stuff that we talk about all the time. It just reinforces the need for education. But like I read the room whenever I walk into a situation, like my own congregation and my own rabbi only recently learned like what I do, because I decided, you know, I had to fill the room and fill the kind of, you know, is this the kind of community that's receptive to this message? So, you know, I try not to, if someone's going to come up to you and just start shouting at you about it with an anti-message, that's not the kind of person